Welcome, everyone, to the Real News Network. My name is Maximillian Alvarez. I'm the editor-in-chief here at the Real News. Thank you so much for joining us. On Monday, October 25th, Sudan's military seized control of the country, arresting Prime Minister Abdalla Hamdok and dissolving the transitional council government that was created to see through the country's transition of power to a more democratic system of governance. The military coup comes just weeks before the military was expected to hand leadership of the Transitional Council over to civilians. That transitional government was formed after protesters revolted against the autocratic government of Omar al-Bashir and forced him out of power in 2019. As Peter Beaumont at The Guardian reports, quote, "The democratic transition, the military and civilian actors eventually agreed, would be overseen by a transitional body, a sovereign council incorporating generals and civilian politicians who would oversee the process. What would transpire in the intervening period was a long-running competition between various Sudanese actors, which came to a head in recent weeks and months, including a previous attempted coup only a month ago, as rival interests, both pro-military and pro-democracy, took to the streets," end quote. So the situation is obviously very much unfolding as we speak. Earlier today, news broke that the deposed prime minister and his wife were allowed to return home after international outcry over the military takeover. Before that, the head of the military, General Abdel-Fattah Burhan, announced on national TV that he was dissolving the government and the Sovereign Council, declared a state of emergency, and said that the military would be appointing a technocratic government to run the country until elections were held in July of 2023. At the same time, pro-democracy demonstrators have been taking to the streets, blocking roads in the capital of Khartoum with makeshift barricades and burning tires. Military troops have responded by firing on crowds, killing at least 4 protesters, according to doctors in the area. We will, of course, be working to bring Real News audiences more information as the political crisis in Sudan continues to unfold. For now, though, we wanted to make sure that folks watching around the world can understand what is happening right now, what led Sudan to this point, and what the international community can do now to show solidarity with the people of Sudan. To talk about all of this, I'm honored to be joined by Mubarak Elamin, who is an activist based in Seattle and a member of the Sudan Policy Network. Mubarak, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for having to share what is happening in Sudan with your audience and with your viewers as well.
We're doing what we can. Obviously, as I said, news is unfolding as we speak, and I'm sure a lot of audiences, especially in the West, primarily here in the United States, may be hearing about this for the first time. And it's important that folks understand what is happening, why it's important. And I'm so grateful to you for taking the time to help us walk through that. And I wanted to actually kind of turn things over to you and ask if you could give viewers a bit of a breakdown, kind of expanding on my very bare bones description on, I guess, what has happened in Sudan this week. And then we'll talk a bit about the larger context behind it.
So what happened this week was really kind of more of, it can easily be described as a betrayal, and also a betrayal of what the civilians and the revolutionaries agreed on in 2019, which is, they agreed to share power with the military so they can actually just take the country through a transitional period. And then in 2023, there was supposed to be an election, and then a democratic government should take over from there. The military this week decided that they will take over, which is really like specifically, it's a coup against the will of the people. And what they did is a clear violation for what they agreed on with the civilian part of the partners. Basically they came in the morning and they rounded, they started with the prime minister and his wife, and also the minister of, industrial, and also another a few of the cabinet members. On top of them was somebody very well known leader in the political arena in Sudan, which is Ibrahim al-Sheikh, and also another person, Khalid, who was the minister in the cabinet of Hamdok.
So can I ask, like, because as we mentioned, there are probably a lot of folks watching around the world who are maybe only getting glimpses of what's happening in Sudan through social media and occasional videos. In the English speaking press, we've largely been getting kind of updates from AP News and Reuters. But I wanted to ask what you have been hearing from folks back in Sudan, or what you've been seeing, or what I guess what you think audiences primarily in the West maybe are not seeing about the events that have unfolded this week.
So what people don't really see is really the bigger question is this something expected or not? And for most of the Sudanese people, they actually expected this. But they thought there are ways to avoid it. And they try to really work hard to avoid to come to this. It seems like from the beginning, people felt like this is like similar to just a bad partnership. But people are willing to work on it so they can actually make it work. And they needed to make compromises. The civilian side, they made a lot of concessions so they can work with the military. And throughout that relationship from 2019, people felt like the military was not sincere in sharing power. They wanted to actually take over. They want to have power all for themselves. And they tried to, really hold on key parts of the government, including the economy and also the security. And then they left the civilians really trying to do things just based on some of the support they have from the international community. But locally, the military tried to really kind of hold on all of the power structures. And this has created a lot of tension. And obviously, people thought that it's going to come to a point where it's going to break down. And they tried to avoid that breakdown. And that's why after the coup that you mentioned like a month ago, it's basically people thought it was a joke, because they thought just the military was trying to kind of, again, try to showcase that, hey, we are the force that can protect the revolution. We are the one who can protect you from these other groups that are trying to take over. And that was not sincere. People knew that. So then fast forward, coming to the day that before October 25th, on October 21st, the Sudanese people were out on the street demonstrating, celebrating another revolution they did in 1964. But also their goal was to showcase that and to show the military that we are strong and we are still the people and we are still the one who hold power, and we are not willing to give in to any military rule. So that was really the message. And they thought the military will get that message, they will understand. But unfortunately, they miscalculated again. They thought they will get some support from the street. They came on the 25th. They staged that coup, and I think that was a miscalculation. So this is really like the picture. And actually, just the day or two before the coup, some of the political leaders were talking about what the military is intending to do, is intending to stage a coup and take over and trying to send a message that the civilian government failed and we are the one who are going to, take you through the transitional period and bring democracy to you, which is completely something that the Sudanese people do not, cannot be fooled, and they don't trust the military, and they will not trust the military. They did not trust the military before, they don't trust it today, and now with this violation, they completely lost trust.
Well, let's talk a bit about, you know, the source of that distrust, right? I mean, you know, I definitely don't want to put you on the spot and ask you to kind of explain the whole, you know, political history of Sudan over the past 50 years, of course, but I guess, you know, there are a lot of kind of essential details here that folks watching definitely need to understand, to I think fully contextualize what they're watching unfold this week. And you've actually, you know, written about this in the past. You had a great piece for Common Dreams that you co-wrote with Michael Beer back in October of 2020, titled "Removing Sudan from the Terror List is Welcome. Yes to assistance, no to extortion." And that brings in kind of this larger international question, right, where the pressure against Omar al-Bashir was very much coming both from the grassroots in Sudan, but also, you know, from, you know, countries like the United States. And so I wanted to ask if you could kind of talk us through a little bit of those kind of larger political forces that have kind of shaped this situation that we're watching in Sudan now.
Yeah, so this is more of really like, so many people actually describe the Sudanese revolution that started in 2019 as 2018, in December 2018, as one of the greatest non-violence revolutions that we've seen in recent history. And for the Sudanese people, that's not a surprise. You know, we had a history of that. We fought military regimes for many, decades. And as I mentioned earlier, in 1964, the Sudanese people actually had a revolution against a dictator at that time. And then in 1985, also they had a revolution against another dictator. And now bringing down the al-Bashir's regime in 2019, that was also, he was one of the most vicious and violent regimes, and still the Sudanese people, were able to bring that general down with all of his, regime and support. Now, the international community, as you just asked, really has been very interested and keen in kind of what is happening in Sudan. And Sudan really sits in a crossroad for a lot of the things that actually, whether between Africa and the Middle East. And that crossroad made Sudan is a very, that strategic location made it, there's a lot of interest in Sudan from the international community. Also, for a long period of time, there were also, if you look at the issues around immigration coming to Europe, coming from some of the war zones in Africa or some other places, really crossing through Sudan, and they were very interested in actually really stabilizing Sudan. So now, if you look at what happened after the revolution, so many countries in the international community came to help Sudan and also support Sudan. But at the same time, there are regional powers that are really not interested in Sudan having a democratic regime, because that's going to set precedence for something that is, or going to showcase, a success in a place where that type or that form of government is not welcome. And I'm just speaking specifically about some of the authoritarian regimes, whether it's in the Gulf or in Saudi Arabia or in Egypt. And they thought, this revolution is just going to be like any of the other revolutions that came in Egypt, and it was aborted, and then a military came and took over, and now they wanted to show, okay, well, a democratic government in this region is not going to survive. So they tried to really kind of make it fail. They worked so hard to make it fail. The Sudanese people really wanted to move forward, and they wanted the U.S. to lift the sanctions at that time. The Sudanese people had a general revolution. They wanted to move forward, but the U.S. was very slow on supporting Sudan. The international community made a lot of promises to support the revolution, but they didn't really come through. And they just showed numbers, but they never actually deliver on them on the time that the Sudanese people needed it, so they can move forward. And on top of that, as I wrote in that article, Michael and I wrote that article because we highlighted, just to demand that the Sudanese people pay back something that for crimes that they did not really, it was committed at the time when even the Sudanese people themselves were under oppression. The Sudanese people themselves were fighting a dictator. And then you're still trying to hold the revolution hostage to the past. That was really took a toll on the Sudanese revolution, for sure. Okay, that delay. And then on top of that comes the COVID-19, and that crisis. And Sudanese right now, probably one of the places where most people are not vaccinated, and there's so many people actually they passed away during that time. So that caused more suffering and really more suffering among the people. And moving, like fast forward, we were asking the US to really step in and also support Sudan, give more aid, and $700 million was really a drop in the bucket for what Sudan needed, and that support didn't even come through. It was just more informed aids, but also it's taking so long to trickle in. So the suffering was really so real. People were struggling, and the irony is where I really wanted to highlight here. Despite that, despite people actually not having enough to put on the table and to put food on the table, they still would rather stay hungry and have democracy and have freedom, okay, and not be ruled by generals who might just be given, be given a lot of subsidies and money from the regional power who hold actually a lot of money, and they have a lot of wealth, and they can actually, provide Sudan with all of their needs, whether it's in gas or bread, or whatever is needed. So my point is, the international community was really slow on coming to the aid of Sudan, and that's really caused a lot of issues internally.
And I mean, I wish that was an exception, to the rule, right? But I mean, it's just so infuriatingly common, in countries around the world where, major powers like the US and, countries in the European Union, right, for all their talk about supporting the pro-democracy movement and being against the military coup, right, we obviously want to stress to viewers to be very wary of superpowers bearing gifts, right, in the global stage, because they often come with the global north's own interests at heart, as you heard Mubarak talk about, right? I mean, there's a litany of kind of offenses that have been kind of committed here. One of the most obvious of which is the fact that Africa's like over 1.3 billion population is barely, I think, above 2% vaccination rate. They're dependent almost entirely on donated vaccines from the global north, to say nothing of all the economic turmoil that has been caused by the pandemic. So it really is a kind of drastic situation, and it really does highlight what you were saying, Mubarak, about the incredible strength of the people to still, amidst all of that, amidst all of the kind of struggles that the Sudanese people have fought over the years against dictators, against the powers of Western capital, and so on and so forth, to still take to the streets and demand democracy. And I wanted to ask, First, I wanted to thank you, a million times for laying all of this out for us. And I wanted to maybe ask your final thoughts on, what the international community, not just like, the heads of state, but really the international working class, people who are watching around the world, what folks can do to show solidarity with the people of Sudan.
People actually, we've been receiving a lot of support and calls from people that, around the world, seriously. And we were really, we were touched by that. And people, even when the revolution was at its highest heights in 2019, people around the world actually used to donate to people who were on the streets, protesting and doing all of that. We're not asking for that. What we're asking for is really to keep an eye on Sudan, and keep an eye on keep the lights on. So then all the crimes against the people, all the violence against the people, all of the killing that happens by the military, it needs to be highlighted and people need to speak against it. And also, here in the States, we tell people to call their representatives to make sure that, our representatives are actually also doing their part in protecting democracy around the world. It's not a lip service. If something that we cherish here, we need to also have it. We need to wish it for others, and also we need to support it around the world. So the people are doing really, all we're asking them just to keep an eye on Sudan, and the Sudanese people are making it very clear that they are themselves capable of taking down the dictator. They don't really need help internally. They are there on the streets, barricading the streets, and also protesting, and they will not be governed by a military general. They made that very clear, and that is the job that they are doing internally. From the international community, they just want them to help them to keep the regional power out of this struggle and not to support the military. And the legitimate government is the government that was brought by the people, by the revolution, which is led by Prime Minister Hamdok and his cabinet. And that needs to happen. That government needs to come back. And also for the General Burhan and Hemeti, they need to resign and go back to their barracks. That's the message we're sending right now.
So that is Mubarak Elamin, a member of the Sudan Policy Network and an activist based here in Seattle, in the United States. Mubarak, thank you so much for talking to us today. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you so much, Max. Appreciate it. And I'm glad that I was able to speak to your viewers and your audience. Thank you.
For everyone watching, this is Maximillian Alvarez for the Real News Network. Before you go, please head on over to therealnews.com/support. Become a monthly sustainer of our work so we can keep bringing you important coverage and conversations just like this. Thank you so much for watching.